Hello, everybody, and welcome to SQL on the Edge. This is episode number 11, Azure Data Lake Fundamentals. My name is Warner Chavez. I'm SQL Server MCM, Microsoft Data Platform MVP, and I work at Pythian. Make sure you visit us at pythian.com. So, the topic for today is going to be a quick intro to Azure Data Lake. Azure Data Lake is a platform as a service slash database as a service offering in Microsoft Azure for big data. So very interesting service. It kind of takes that concept of a managed Hadoop, let's say, for example, like Amazon does with EMR and Azure itself does with HD Insight, and takes it to the next logical step, I would say. And the big difference is this one. If you're working with HD Insight or EMR, you need to provision a cluster. Once the cluster is up, you can read the data off from the storage, do your analytics, and produce an output. And then you have to destroy the cluster if you don't want to keep spending money and having charges for that cluster, right? The clusters unfortunately don't have the concept of just like pausing and then resuming again. So Azure Data Lake comes in to fill this gap by splitting the service into two different components. It's a storage service, and it's also an analytics service that you are only charged for your analytics jobs. So it can really easily fit into a larger organization's data strategy, because if you don't know what you're going to do with a particular set of data, you can just put it on the storage component, so on an Azure Data Lake Store account, accumulate the data, and you're only paying for storage. You're not going to be paying for the analytics until the moment that you do decide to use the analytics. Then you only pay for that. It is 100% a type of big data unstructured service. You don't have to put or specify any sort of schema on the files. You can define your schema on read, and it also mixes well with structured data as well. So you can also mix with data that's coming from, let's say, an Azure SQL DB or an Azure SQL Data Warehouse. And that's another piece that is obviously very important, because the service lives in Azure. It's tightly integrated to the other pieces of the Azure ecosystem, such as SQL DB, SQL Data Warehouse, Powered BI, Azure Machine Learning, Azure Data Factory, and so on. Okay. The main goals of the service, like I mentioned, are cost efficiency, which is achieved by splitting the service into the store piece and the analytics piece, and the analytics piece only being paid on demand. And the easy to use piece is achieved by the use of a new language called U-SQL, which we'll check in the demo. So let's just jump to the demo. I'm going to show you the experience right now in the portal. If you are part of the preview, you're going to be able to see what the experience right now is for the store, for the analytics, and I'll show just a little bit of U-SQL that comes in as part of the samples provided by Microsoft in the portal. Okay, so let's check it out. Okay, so I am connected right now to the Azure portal. Now, the quickest way to find Data Lake Store and Data Lake Analytics and to be able to opt into the preview is if you go here to More Services and then just type in Data Lake. Then we'll get them there right away, the first two hits of the search. As you guys can see, it actually says preview as well. So first, let's look at Data Lake Store and what the experience currently is there. So I already have a Data Lake Store account there. You guys can see the name is Warner. It's located in East US 2. So if I click on it, I can see how much space I'm currently using in my Data Lake Store. Obviously here I just use it for demo purposes, so I only have about 40 megs on it. And you can also actually explore the contents as well through the Data Explorer. So I can click here on Data Explorer, and I can see the three root folders there that I have on my Warner account. The catalog and system are internal to Data Lake Store. The catalog one is actually for the U-SQL catalog. That is where U-SQL can store functions, procedures, tables, and so on. I also have a samples folder. That samples folder I copied from samples from Microsoft that you can copy as well from the portal. So the cool thing, you can obviously browse your Data Lake Store with Data Explorer. If you actually do go into an item where Azure understands the format of the file, like a flat file, this case is a TSV, a tab separated value file, it'll give you a preview of what the file looks like. So if I go here to this search log as well, you guys can see I get a preview, so I get a good idea of what the file looks like. And through the portal, I can download the file I can change the properties and security of the file and so on. So that's pretty much the Data Lake Store piece of the experience. It's very oriented just to browsing the data, and if you need to do some manual uploading of files, you can do it as well through the portal. Okay, so let's do that the same thing again. We'll go through more services and go to Data Lake. And now I'm just going to go here to Data Lake Analytics. So the analytics piece is the one that actually runs the jobs that can consume the data from the Data Lake Store. So I have an analytics account as well here. Now, if you look at the analytics account, you can see there that it is tied into a default Data Lake Store, which is the one that I just showed you guys before, right? So an analytics account, you'll tie it up to the analytics Data Lake Store, and that will be the default data store that the account will use when you reference paths in the scripts. Now, something that's really cool about the portal experience right now for Data Lake Analytics is that you can actually do some interactive tutorials. So if I click right down here, it'll take me to this website log analysis sample, and it takes you to different steps of doing a website log analysis. So step number one, I already did it before. It's basically to copy a file into your Data Lake Store account so you can use it as the input for the analysis that we're going to do. And then the next steps are all about running a small bit of U-SQL to accomplish something. So here in this case, for example, this is a very simple U-SQL, and we can see here on the first line, it creates a database if it doesn't exist. If it drops the function if it exists, because we're about to create it here. And then what the function does is really simple. So the function returns a table, and you get the schema of the table here. But the schema is specified on read, right? That's the way that we can just ingest any type of data into Data Lake Store and only specify the schema on read. In this case, we're using a just the white space delimiter, and we're specifying the different columns that we should get from the flat file here. And the flat file is found in the samples. Like I said, I copied it before I started the recording of the demo, right? So, and here in the interface, we can just go around and submit it. The one thing that we can change here is the parallelism. And the definition here on the portal, it says the max number of compute processes that can happen at the same time, right? So with the slider here, I can go all the way to 50. That's the analytic units. Or for something, I mean, here we're just creating a database and creating a function. We can just leave it for parallelism equals 1. And then when you're ready to just try out the tutorial and continue with it, you can actually submit the U-SQL job and then come back and continue with the other steps after the job is running. Now that the job is running, we can actually take a look in the portal as to how far along the job is and what step it is on. If you guys can see here, we can see the job is being prepared already. It is now being queued, and then so on and so forth. It'll go into running state and finalizing state and eventually complete. So at this point, the first job is complete. So we can close this down, and we can go back here to continue the rest of the tutorial. Say okay. Now we go to step number 3 of the tutorial. Now look at what we're doing here. So what we're doing here is we're actually creating a table inside the U-SQL catalog. We're just dropping it if it exists. We're specifying that we want a table in the U-SQL catalog, and we want it to have a clustered index on the year and partition on a hash partition based on the year, right? So it's going to read all the data, it's going to partition it by doing a hash of the year, and then it's going to store it sorted by year as well. And we're going to be using that function that we defined on the previous job. So now we can run a simple select statement and a count distinct from the output of that function and do a group by, and all that will just go in and be the results will populate this table that we have here. So this is a very common construct in U-SQL. It's also a very common construct inside Azure SQL Data Warehouse, and is the create table as, and then we specify what we want for it. Okay. So at this point, same thing. We can pick if we want to increase or decrease the parallelism of our jobs. Here, I'm just going to submit it again. So the job is running, and same as before, we can actually go in and keep track of the progress of the job as it executes. Notice here as well that now we also get a graphical representation of what is going to be the execution plan for this particular U-SQL job, right? So we're going to read the input, go into this extract partition step, then it's going to split the file into many different pieces. Now remember, we're doing a group by, so it also has a node there to do the aggregation, and then finally to put the results on the referrers per day table. And the job is complete now. So now we have what we wanted in this referrers per day table that we have inside U-SQL. So we can go back here and just go OK. And now we can go into another another analytical step. So now we had the function that would map the file to a result of a table. We use that function and further aggregated on it to put the results on a U-SQL table, and now we're using that U-SQL table right here, and we're basically saying we want the result here, this add content variable, to hold the select star of all the referrers of the day that had this status between 400 and 500, and just output that content to this samples outputs unsuccessful responses log file, right? So we're going to submit this job as well. We can see the job is running now as well. And we're going to wait for this job to complete as well. And again, you can see that we can see in the portal the graphical representation of the execution plan here, going through the table, doing the extract step, then an aggregation to give us that unsuccessful responses log file. And the job is complete now. And what we can do now to verify this, we can actually go back into my Data Lake Store Data Explorer. And if we go into the samples and the outputs, and we can click on this unsuccessful responses log file, and we can see the results of our analytics job. Okay, so I hope you got a good overview of what the portal experience is right now with Data Lake, and I hope you also got a good idea of what the value proposition of Data Lake is. So remember, main thing is that there's two subservices, Data Lake Store and Data Lake Analytics. Data Lake Store is just basically a file system. It doesn't impose any sort of restrictions on the format or schema of the files. It doesn't have a restriction on the size of the account. It doesn't have a restriction on the amount of files or the size of a particular file. Then the other piece is Data Lake Analytics, and the big power of this analytics service is that you only pay for the jobs. When you run the job, you pay for that small amount of compute. If it's a very long job, obviously you would pay for whatever amount of compute you're consuming, but that's it. At the moment that the job has stopped and completed, you're not paying for anything anymore. Number two big thing about Data Lake Analytics is U-SQL. U-SQL is a mix of T-SQL and C#, so it makes it really easy for data pros to just jump on the service and start doing big data. I've shown it to many other DBAs, and people's eyes lit up when they saw how easy suddenly it was to do big data analytics, whereas before they were looking at the Hadoop ecosystem and being kind of confused about, should I use Hive? Am I supposed to be writing stuff in Pig, or am I supposed to be using some newer stuff like Spark? And you show them, hey, you can just use this service instead. It's called U-SQL. Look, it looks very similar to SQL, and it's just the learning curve suddenly becomes a lot leaner compared to learning the entire Hadoop ecosystem. So you can really get up and running really fast, get a return of investment really fast over doing big data. All right, so thanks for watching. Until next time, have a good day.